17 years after Michael Jackson's death, his estate just scored a major legal victory in a battle that involves shocking accusations, alleged extortion, and a family that claims they were the King of Pop's second family for 3 decades. This story has everything: child abuse allegations, a $213 million extortion claim, and a judge's ruling that just changed everything. Let's start with what just happened. On March 4th, a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge granted the Jackson estate's petition to compel arbitration in their legal battle against Frank Cascio, who wrote a memoir called My Friend Michael and has been one of Jackson's most passionate defenders for years. The decision means the parties can take their legal battle out of court and into private arbitration. The judge found that the estate had a valid and binding arbitration provision within a legal agreement that Cascio signed in 2020. But here's where it gets complicated and, frankly, disturbing. This isn't just about Frank Cascio. 4 of his siblings, brothers Edward, Dominic, and Aldo Cascio, and their sister, Marie-Nicole Port, filed a bombshell lawsuit on February 27th in California federal court, claiming Michael Jackson sexually abused them as children. Their lawsuit alleges that Jackson was a serial child predator who, over the course of more than a decade, drugged, raped, and sexually assaulted each of the plaintiffs, beginning when some of them were as young as 7 or 8. 7 or 8 years old, that's what they're claiming. The siblings say they met Jackson through their father, who worked at a hotel the singer frequented, and that Jackson and his companies are liable for child sex trafficking, negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent hiring, fraud, and breach of contract. Now, the Jackson estate tells a completely different story. In their July 9th petition, the Michael Jackson Company and its officers, who are also co-executors of the Jackson estate, accused Frank Cascio of attempting to carry out a $213 million civil extortion scheme. $213 million. That's what the estate claims this is really about: money. The petition alleged that the Cascios and their family demanded substantial amounts of money, otherwise they threatened to concoct false allegations against Michael, which were the opposite of their prior glowing statements. So, according to the estate, the Cascios spent 30 decades being Michael Jackson's biggest defenders, writing books about what a great friend he was, and then suddenly turned around and demanded hundreds of millions of dollars by threatening to make abuse allegations that contradict everything
they've said for 3 decades. But the Cascios tell yet another version of events. According to their lawsuit, they were groomed and brainwashed by Jackson, and it wasn't until the release of the bombshell HBO documentary, Leaving Neverland, in 2019, that they were deprogrammed and forced to become conscious of the reality that Jackson's abuse was wrong and had severely damaged them. Leaving Neverland was the documentary featuring Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who also claimed Jackson abused them as children. That documentary reignited the debate about Jackson's legacy and whether he was a child predator or a victim of false accusations. Now, here's where the legal maneuvering gets really interesting. The Cascios claim that in 2019, they were compelled under false pretenses to sign an agreement. The document was described to them as a life rights agreement, but according to their lawsuit, it actually released the Jackson estate from liability for Jackson's crimes. They say if they had understood the full meaning of the document, they would never have signed it. That's their argument for why the arbitration agreement shouldn't be valid. The estate's attorney, Marty Singer, said in a statement that the estate reluctantly paid the Cascios $2.8 million each over 5 years to protect Michael's family as well as future projects important to Michael's legacy and fans. Wait, the estate paid them $2.8 million each, so they already got paid nearly $3 million per person, and now they're suing for more? According to the estate, yes. They claim that around April 2024, the Cascios reached out wanting to increase their compensation, and this time they had their own lawyers. After that, they demanded compensation proportional to Jackson's crimes and the harm they caused, which prompted the estate to go public with extortion allegations. Frank Cascio's attorney, Howard King, responded to the recent court ruling by saying the only matter moving to arbitration is the estate's groundless claims against Frank Cascio that he attempted to extort the estate. The decision does not affect the federal court action brought against the Jackson companies by the other 4 Cascio children. So Frank's case goes to arbitration, but his siblings' lawsuit continues in federal court. That's an important distinction. Now, the Cascio's previous attorney was Mark Garagos. Yes, that Mark Garagos, the high-profile Hollywood power attorney who used to support Jackson and represent him. Garagos argued in previous filings that the acquisition and consulting agreement was unconscionable and should be voided. He claimed Cascio signed under duress because he didn't fully understand the legal language, 9 of his family members had already signed, and he didn't have his own legal representation at the time. Garagos wrote, "This petition is not a good faith effort to compel arbitration pursuant to a valid contract, but rather an attempt by the estate to shield themselves and the estate of Michael Jackson from accountability and public scrutiny." He continued, "Petitioners seek to weaponize an unlawful agreement to silence victims of childhood sexual abuse, smear and discredit respondents, and preserve Michael Jackson's carefully protected legacy and the estate's reputational and financial interests." That's pretty damning language. Weaponize an unlawful agreement to silence victims and preserve Michael Jackson's carefully protected legacy. But notably, Garagos is no longer representing Cascio. He withdrew in February, and now Cascio is represented by Howard King. So, what do we make of all this? On one hand, you have 4 siblings claiming Michael Jackson drugged, raped, and sexually assaulted them starting when they were as young as 7 or 8. They say his employees facilitated and concealed the abuse, and that they were victims of sex trafficking. On the other hand, you have an estate that says this same family spent 30 years being Michael Jackson's biggest defenders, calling themselves his second family, and that Frank Cascio literally wrote a book called My Friend Michael in 2011, where he presumably painted Jackson in a positive light. The estate claims they already paid the family nearly $3 million each, and now the Cascios are demanding hundreds of millions more by threatening to make abuse allegations that contradict everything they've said for 3 decades. The judge's ruling that Frank Cascio's case goes to arbitration is a win for the estate because arbitration is private. The public won't see the evidence or testimony the way they would in a trial, but his siblings' federal lawsuit continues in federal court, which means those allegations will still be litigated publicly. Michael Jackson died in 2009 at age 50 from an overdose of propofol. He was acquitted in 2005 of child molestation charges in a highly publicized trial, but allegations about his behavior with children have followed his legacy ever since. The Leaving Neverland documentary in 2019 reignited the controversy and led to some radio stations pulling his music and renewed debate about whether we can separate the art from the artist. Now, 17 years after his death, we have 4 more accusers, a $213 million extortion claim, and a legal battle that's far from over. The truth? We may never know it with certainty, but what we do know is that Michael Jackson's legacy remains one of the most controversial in entertainment history, and this legal battle is just the latest chapter in a story that refuses to end.
As a single mom, your support means everything to me. Please subscribe for more updates and stories like this. Thank you.